Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Harold Campos and today I will be doing a short presentation on the BizTalk migration starter. Recently we have announced or confirmed the end of life of BizTalk Server, which is our server integration product that has been around for more than 25 years. Logic Apps concentrates most of the features of BizTalk Server in this as a PaaS service that not only allows to integrate with legacy workloads and deterministic scenarios, but also has the agent loop and the AI capabilities that will allow you to bring your integration workloads into AI as well natively, right? One common ask from customers is, how do I migrate? Right, because BizTalk and any PaaS service are so different, and Logic Apps, while we have done a lot of work to incorporate most of the core features of BizTalk Server and provide the ability to reuse artifacts like schemas, maps, and etc. There is work to be done, and what I've tried to do over the last few weeks is I've tried to come up with a tool that will help you get started. So it's not going to do the whole work. You will probably say that you will cover a good portion of the basic scenarios that you have, and for the complex scenarios you will still have to do some work. But I think it's a good starting point for customers who are trying to start early. We are planning to create also additional tools, and we will talk more about that very soon. So a BizTalk workload consists of schemas, maps, orchestrations, rule sets, custom code and assemblies, pipeline components, trading partner management configurations, and many others, right? So when I ask a customer, hey, listen, you got to migrate, then the first question is, how do I do it, right? And where do I start? That's exactly where we thought, hey, listen, we'll do a GitHub Copilot-based approach where we will allow customers to use an agent in VS Code and then do the work, right? And we're actively working on it. But while that is happening, I thought, why is it that we don't provide a tool that can get customers started to make sure that customers, at least they are running basic workloads in the cloud that are coming from BizTalk Server. So we always recommend a wave-based gradual approach for modernization. While we've been calling this BizTalk migration, it's not really a migration. It's more than that. It's a modernization process. And we are conscious that any migration takes time and takes work. And that's how the migration started was born. The BizTalk migration starter is this tool that I have created that has tools for a bit of everything, right? So it has a tool that does a conversion from ODX files, which are the orchestration files, into workflows, in Logic Apps workflows. It does a pretty good job, in different scenarios, but in many cases you will likely have to use GitHub Copilot to refine, the generation of the workflow. It's but again, so it does a pretty good job typically in most of the orchestration that I have tested, and I tested hundreds of them, different types of complexity, from very simple to very complex. I'll show you how that works very soon. There is also, that is the ODX to Workflow Migrator project. There is also the BTP to LA or BizTalk pipelines to Logic Apps workflows. There is a tool that I have created also to migrate from the BizTalk pipeline components or BizTalk pipelines into Logic Apps workflows. It will cover most of the basic scenarios. I will say that all of the basic scenarios, and it will do a bit more than that. You will still have to do some work, on these third parties that you might have been using in pipelines if you want to follow this approach. And there is another tool, which is the BTM to LML migrator or BizTalk maps to liquid, I think it's liquid mapping language definition, or LML, that will allow you to convert the legacy BizTalk maps into LML files that are used in the data mapper for you to be able to customize them. Now, from BizTalk, and this is what I will show you, right? So this is a simple orchestration, which is not the simplest, but it's a simple orchestration that has a receive, it has a decide, so there is some message assignment to variables and such, and then a construct, and then the send, right? That is basically the pattern, the most basic pattern that BizTalk has. So something gets in, gets processed, and then something gets out, right? It's a pipeline. at the high level. So what you see on the left side, that's how it looks in BizTalk, and what you see on the right side is how it looks in Logic Apps. Every time that we have this conversation with colleagues and the field and customers, it's always listen, these are different approaches, right? These are different architectures, so this is probably not the best way to go for customers, right? And I agree, right? I think there has to be some degree of refactoring. It can be, small or big. It depends, because, you will be noticing that if I compare the orchestration with the workflow, clearly there are a lot of opportunities for improvement, right? And I'll show you what I mean, right? The first part of this process is the preparation. So you have to prepare the environment to use this tool. You will create a Logic app using the Azure portal or VS Code. Your Logic app should have access to the systems you need to integrate against. Like, this includes networking, security, or any other settings. So think about, if you are moving any workloads to the cloud or to on-premises with hybrid, what would you be needing? So, and that is part of the landing zones exercise, and we have guidance for that, and we'll share that guidance for you as well if you are not familiar with our Azure cloud. You need to have schemas, maps, and rule sets loaded into the Logic Apps artifacts directories or integration accounts if you are using integration accounts. This also includes HIDX files if you require connecting to mainframes or mid-ranges. You need to have access to the source code using your solution, along with the ODX files, pipeline components, and complete exported bindings from your BizTalk applications. And this part is key, right? I'm working with the understanding that you have access to the BizTalk server application that hosts your production workloads, and you're going to be able to generate your bindings from there. Now, the second part is the actual migration, and as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have the BizTalk Maps to LML migrator that will allow you to take a map, and for that you need a map, and you need both the schemas, the input and output. You will see some functoids in the middle, a lot of functoids. It depends. And on the right side, you will have the outcome, which is basically an LML file that gets open in the data mapper. So you have to create a map definition in the data mapper, paste the code of the LML migrator tool, and then of course have your schemas in the right places in the schemas directory, input and output, and then it will load the map for you. There is always a chance that it runs into issues and it doesn't load it, right? So that's why I trust GitHub Copilot to give you the right guidance. If you have a very specific scenario, I'm sharing the code in a repo, so you will have access to it, and you will be able to make as many changes as needed. But out of the as well hundreds of maps that I use, different kinds of maps from EDI to simple ones, it does a pretty good job, and in most, I think it has a good coverage of functoids as well, right? So our team is also working on a tool, right, that we will be sharing soon, that will allow you to convert to do conversion from XSLT to XSLT, from the legacy maps to the new data mapper. So then you can also reuse scripting functoids, which is what is not supported right now, and we will be providing you an approach for that. Right. This is basically explaining what you need to have. You need to have the maps uploaded, and all of these will be shared. So this content, I will be sharing this presentation, I don't know, with the GitHub repo as well. So and then you can go over to the details to it, because I don't want to take too long on this presentation. Logic Apps can run existing BizTalk maps already, right? So that's important to mention. This procedure is more what I'm explaining here is more when you need to be able to make changes to your maps, right? We've been able to run BizTalk maps for a while in Logic Apps. If you want to make changes, then it's better if they are available in the data mapper. The generated LMLs will support most of the functoids, as I said, and convert them into the data mapper functions. Scripting functoids are unsupported, and the LML will include the code from the scripting functoid commented out. So then you will have a chance to create a local function, and then we will provide a solution for those cases very soon as well. No, we have the orchestrations migrator that is basically a converter, right? So it takes the ODX file and the bindings and it generates a trigger and actions. And you will say, yeah, what happens with multiple receives and how does it know what trigger to use? So it will do a very good job in reading the bindings and it will try to create what it's called, it creates a hierarchy of objects and then with this model, it maps them and then it generates the workflow, right? So you will see that in action, but it does a pretty good job in mapping your orchestration to the workflow, and I think this is essential in many cases because when customers decide to use these visual designers, they incorporate tons of business logic in the visual part of it, right? So that's why sometimes they ask of redo everything or record everything. They are not only not reasonable, but they are cumbersome to do. It converts the orchestrations to Logic Apps workflows, and this is again a starting point for customers to bring your solutions into Logic Apps. So this is not meant to be the target solution, the end solution for everything, right? I mean, we understand that there is refactoring, but this is a great starting point, and we have some customers testing it already, and it's saving a lot of time in work because they are able to see the data flowing and troubleshoot, and then they are able to shorten the complexity, reduce the complexity of these workflows. The migrator parses the ODX files and extracts the orchestration metadata. It maps BizTalk shapes to Logic Apps actions, receive triggers and action, etc. Maps BizTalk adapters to Azure Logic Apps connectors. It generates a workflow JSON ready for Azure deployment. And it will save, the workflow will save, but you will need to, once you open it, right, once you start doing the work, you have to finish it, right? So you will need to customize each trigger, the trigger and actions with information of your systems, credentials, and data, right? Because it's, otherwise it will not save, right? It's like opening an object. It will open the first time, right? But then, it will start running the validations against the other actions and everything. So that's why I always recommend have everything ready, so then you can and start with the simplest workflow, so then you can do that work moving forward, and complete your migration for the orchestration. So you need two artifacts: the ODX file and the complete bindings for your BizTalk application. So you have to export a complete file for your BizTalk application. The tool will generate a JSON file or multiple JSON files in batch mode, so it supports batch mode. It has a lot of options, and you will copy the JSON file content into a new Logic Apps workflow. So you will create a new Logic Apps workflow, and then the JSON definition that's what's generated by the tool. You will save and then customize the workflow, and the syntax is as simple as this, right? ODX to workflow migrator.exe. Name of the ODX with location, name of the bindings with location, and workflow.json. And finally, the pipeline migrator or BTP to LA project, which basically converts a pipeline component into a Logic Apps workflow, right? And then there is a part that I am sort of skipping here, which is the part of, listen, Harold, you have a receive, and then something happens, and then we see a decoding, stage, right? And here is this detail, right? All of these orchestrations, they provide a structure, but we don't have a message as you will in BizTalk server, right? So we don't have that concept. So we have but we have a parse with XML and compose with XML. Parse XML with XSD schema and compose XML with XSD schema that you can use to craft your objects, and they will be available in the designer. So that is exactly what I'm going to show you in this short demonstration as well in a few minutes. The pipeline migrator, it supports all of the most common stages. For third parties, you will have to create a function, and then create a function first, and then incorporate it in the logic of your JSON file, and we'll show you how to do that. So this process of customizations of the workflow provides, the migration starter also provides multiple recommendations based on the patterns of your orchestrations or bindings. So there are tons of options, and you will have time to test each one of them. Please, own the code, own the solution, and and you will see that you will be able to do a lot of things. I have provided test cases that you can run, right? And there is also a refactoring option that will attempt to create a workflow optimized, to the particular scenario that it detects. If it tries to detect that if there is a convoy, it will probably incorporate some messaging components like from service bus or RabbitMQ on premises. So that is available, in the tool. So that's why I invite you to own the code and to make as many changes as possible, and customize it to your needs. There is work, like for instance, the code in BizTalk expressions will be injected into compose operations, and you will have to move this code into an inline C# action or consolidate it, right, along with the rest of your code in classes via the Logic Apps custom code experience. As soon as you have your orchestration in Logic Apps, you will notice multiple modernization opportunities. BizTalk allows different shapes to have the same name. Logic Apps is more strict on that front, right? So you will need to rename triggers and actions accordingly. And finally, you have to determine, where to deploy, right? You can go in the cloud with a standard on Azure and runs as a PaaS service. We manage environment, runs on the app service as well. We have WS instances 1, 2, 3, or we can run on ASE v3 or hybrid on premises or cloud. Runs on Kubernetes. You manage environment. This is semi-disconnected, by the way, right? So all of the runtime runs on your environment, but the portal is the portal. You have to go through the portal. We have surveys for customers who, and this is running in Kubernetes, as I said. So then wherever Kubernetes runs, then this will run. We have a couple of surveys here. One, what features do you need that you don't see or, that is critical for your migration? Please go to aka.ms/logicappsneeds. And the other one is aka.ms/LA disconnected for cloud or on-prem only. Like for instance, you want to run infrastructure on AKS in the cloud, right? If that is not an option, right, for you to run in the cloud, because you don't use the cloud, right? For instance, you have to run on-prem only. Please let us know in this survey. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to show you the demonstration. Now let me show you how this works. So let me stop presenting this, and I'll go to VS Code. So let me start saying that, let me go to my BizTalk server, right? And in my BizTalk server, you will see that I have this project. And this is the project that I was just talking about at the beginning. This BizTalk project has an orchestration, right? It has a math library is called, the class that it has, that's supporting some functions to add and subtract. It's fairly straightforward, actually. It has a custom code part here, right? And it has the orchestration here, the method called service. The project is called method called sample, right? And it has a receive. It has an assigned variables expression, right? So if I see there is a key, let me go to properties window, right? You will see that there is an assignment of variables, right? I bar 1, 2, and 3 math bar, right? There is this text in the expression. Right, there is a decide here, the decide one, and it has all of these options, right? If I bar 3 equals add, or if it equals a sub, then the name of it. So this is very visual, or else terminate, right? And then there is a tracing part, right? Right line, I result. There is a construct message where there is a message assignment. This message is construct from this method using construct doc, that is here in the helper. Right, construct doc, yeah, exactly, there's one construct doc. And basically what it does, it receives a file with this schema, input schema, and it returns this output schema, right? It's basically the result. Fairly straightforward. If I go to the BizTalk Central administration, then you'll say that I have this method called sample, right? I have deployed the application. For you to export the binding, you do here, bindings, and then export all bindings from the current application, right? If you have global party information, then you mark it, but you don't have it for this one because this is not B2B, right? So then we cancel it, right? And then you see this has been deployed, it's active. It has the send port, right? The send port to this URI here, that is the one that will be writing a file to the out location, with percentage message ID, XML transmit pipeline, right? A receive port, a receive location, This receive location is pointing to, of course, the in directory, right? Using file, you have all of these alternatives: Informix, Logic App, MLLP, MQSC, and such. And then I go to the directory here, right, and method call, and I take the input file, right? The input file says 1010 add, okay, so it's gonna be, I guess, 20, right? We take the input, and then we drop it here in, and it goes out, right? And this was just created 2 p.m. Yes, this is it, right? So okay, so this is the one 10 10 20, right? Fairly. Let me do it again, so for you to see the magic of BizTalk, right? Let me go back and paste the input file. Yes, pasted. Out. Yes, it's very quick, right? So you have to fight. Anyway, so now let me go back to the point of this presentation. So what you're seeing here, and let me show you something real quick. I have my commands here. This is the starter, the BizTalk migration starter, and as I mentioned, you have a few projects here, right? So you have the ODX to workflow migrator, which is the one that will convert the workflow into the Logic App workflow. The BTP to LA, which we are not using in this example, but I'll show you how to, which is the one that will convert the pipeline components into workflow, and the BTM to LML migrator that will generate the LML for you to process, which this one doesn't have maps, but I'll show you how to do it and run the command for you. And then you have a comprehensive set of tests, and when you want to test your own data, you drop it here where it says BizTalk, right? Of course, in the, when you have the actual location. Bindings here, right? And then ODX, your ODX is here, right? And maps, BizTalk maps and pipelines here, right? And then when you run the test, you will have all of the outcomes here. Okay, so you will run the test and you do run tests, so you can go here and test, and test explorer, you will see a bunch of tests, because I have created a bunch of tests because I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to test all of this. There are multiple scenarios there. I mean, you're gonna like this, I'm sure, right? And then you run them. But anyway, so I was digressing. So this is the project, and there is also an MCP server. So if you want to go beyond, right, beyond just the deterministic scenario, I have added an MCP server here that you can deploy. You can do that locally, right? And you will have access to all of the tools of these other projects. Again, so own the code, right? Own the code, make as many changes as possible. I mean, this is if there is anything to add, just let me know. In the repo. And okay, so again, I was digressing. So let me go back to the command, right? So I have a number of commands here, right? I'll take this one first, which is the one that generates the method call service coming from the ODX file, right? And using the binding for this method call service is here in pair ODX, right? It will generate this method call service JSON. I'm gonna change the name to demo, demo, I don't know, 505, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna copy this, right? And I'm gonna run it here. Let me see this is it. So I'll paste it here, right? And I'll run it, right? And when it runs, it will tell you what it did, right? The shapes that it found and everything, and it will tell you how many actions were mapped. And then if I go to the directory, right, you will see that this is the file that it created. If I open the file, right, you will see that there's a somewhat JSON file here, right, almost JSON, right, file, and then you will take the content of it. And previously, you go to your Logic App, and then you create this one, create stateful, test 505, we call it, right, 506. 7, okay, create, and then once we create this, let's just wait for it. 506, okay, so it creates an empty workflow. I go to code, right, and then I take, let me see somewhere here, was it this? where was it? Or was it here? Oh, it was this one, right? So I take the code from the JSON, right, definition, and then I go back to the content, and I will replace almost everything, right, up to here, right? So I'll replace this, and then I'll get rid of this. It's something that we need to fix, and then hit save. And then you will see that magically we have here a trigger, right? And this trigger it goes to the service provider for file system, right? Because in the binding, it was pointing to an in location. So then you will see that it has of course it's failing, right? Because it has an invalid connection. There's no connection for it, and it has a bunch of variables here, right? So in the portal, you will see all of these ivar 1, 2, 3, matvar, iresult, and outgoing. As variables, you will see the code that you had in this expression, and then you will have to decide, and then you will have the call to the method that you had in the class and everything, and then write the stretch statement. When there is a shape that is of unknown nature, or if there is a construct where it didn't find the map because you didn't upload it or whatever, it will call to ascend, and this is part of the binding. So this is normal behavior. If you don't need it, just get rid of it, right? And then you have the method called send port, which will be writing to this out location. So then, in logic apps now, remember that when I was doing the first part of the presentation, I said that you have to have ready the dependencies. This is exactly the part that I meant, right? Because when you go to the trigger, right, that's gonna look for the file, you're gonna have to connect to it, right? So you have to create a connection, change connection, and then you have to create a connection to your to the directory. So for that, your logic app has to have access to your directory, right? And that's something that you will have to provide ahead of time, right? The root folder, username, password, right? And then once that works and you have the right ports open and everything, then you'll be able to see the file, right? So, and then, I did all of that, and I'll show you what's the target result, right? Well, first of all, no, this is not the one. VS Code here. It's my version. This one, right? So what I did is, okay, you saw what it generates. What it generates, it's something like this, right? There is a mAt going, a number of variables. In the portal, we have the ability to consolidate all of them in one. In VS Code, it will list all of the variables for you, right? Nicely done. So we go to the code. And then what I did is I renamed this. Of course, I placed the path for it, right, to do the polling. There is some weird behavior in Windows 11 that, for SMB and for monitoring, it's better when you do it, from the portal, right, and with the right permissions and everything. So I have to go around it. Get file content. It gets the file content. It reads. I added this action as well, and then you have the parse XML with the schema, which is exactly what is going to use your input schema, the original BizTalk schema that is stored in the logic app, right? In the artifacts here, you will see that in the schemas, I should have it here, input schema, output schema, right? And what is going to happen is that I'm going to fill this var 1, var 2, var 3 with the values coming from the previous, from the get file content, right? So if I hit here, you have the get file content is the file content, sorry, from the parse XML with schema, you have that it will recognize, it will convert, using the XSD schema definition, it will convert the data into JSON. So then you'll have field 1, field 2, field 3, right? And then ivar 1 set to field 1, ivar 2 to field 2. So you will see, and this is exactly what I was referring when I said that there is a lot of, things that you don't have to do in the same way, right? In your workflow, you can get rid of all of this and then place them in code in one plain assignment, right, or one compose operation, right, and then matvar, right. I'm not even initializing this one. iresult, I'm just creating it right now, but it's empty, right. Assign variables, I'm doing I'm keeping this here, right. Do I need it? I don't need it, right, because I'm not assigning anything, right. I can delete it and it will be the same. But what I've known though is that when I create a logic app, right? When I create a logic app from here, so I create a logic app, create new logic app workspace, right, and such. It's gonna ask me, for a workspace, it's gonna ask me, I want a custom code experience, and I said yes, custom code with .NET Framework, and I picked the .NET Framework, right? So, and that's exactly how this project was created. Now, one thing to consider, though, is that once this is created, it will create a project for me, for me to add function here, and it will give me a class, and in this class I have to create, what is going to be exposed as a function, right? So then I have a function name, a local function that's called add, right, with this task, with run add, I call it, right, and it calls the helper class that the helper, the math helper class that has a method called add, right? If I scroll down, you will see that the method is somewhere here, right? Add receives two ints and then return a plus b, right? So that's exactly, and this is the one that does the construct doc, right? So this is how you preserve the custom code. I mean, of course, this is an utterly extremely easy example, but you can have any complex class, and this is .NET Framework again, as I said, right? So you will see that this is .NET Framework and .NET 4.7.2, right? We support .NET 8 as well, and then I think it's .NET 8 here, 6 and 8. And then I go back to the workflow definition, right, where I was, and then you will see that I have this function called here add, and then this other function called sub, right, and I pass the parameters. I set variable of the function output, right, to the iResult, and then I call the construct message, right. Again, in this case, I don't need to do it, right? I mean, I'm just keeping it for the sake of the argument. I can do delete because I don't need this construct. And this is one of the things that you don't need in logic apps, because I'm calling a function that is running the construct function and using the iResult and then getting the method, sending the file to the method called import, right? So then if I wanted to run this, I would do something like this: run, start debugging, right? And this is VS Code again, and then this has, hopefully the latest extension, right? And I go here to, let me see if, I know where this is. This is C, demos, I think. Demos, right? List of migration. And then go to the in. So the original file is this one, input 2, right? And I'm gonna make it simple. So let me see if it's running here already. Yeah, it's running here, right? I'll go to overview. So to see, what's going on with it, I go to overview in the workflow JSON, right? And this is not the one. I paste it here, right? And then I pasted it here just to see if it works. Then I go here. This is 5:14 for me, Toronto time at 5:14, and then you will see that it created the input 2 was 15:13 add, and the outcome was 28. Now, so it worked. Yes, it worked. So you can go and you can see the details of the execution, how long it took, what it did. And this is, of course, we wrap this in base 64, so you can see it in base 64 as well, and all of the characteristics of the XML that you can customize. The values, 15, 13, add, that came from the file, were converted into JSON, and then you have your workflow ready, and then the method calls import that pretty much serializes this file content that came from the construct that was returned. Now, it took me a few hours to do this for many reasons, right? I mean, probably you say, you can do that in 10 minutes, running the command and doing the conversion. Yes, of course. For something that simple, yes. I think the part where I struggled a little bit more was in the part of the file system and figuring out the paths and everything when you are running local in the context of the VS Code, right? I mean, unlike in the portal you have a direct connection, and here you run on behalf of a process and everything. But anyway, so what I try to do is I try to show how realistic is to have something working, right? I mean, it's if you just want to make it work, so then you see data, you see flow, and then you can refactor. This is a fantastic alternative for you to do or to use. Right now, you may be asking, but that is an utterly simple orchestration. So then let's do something like this, right? Let's do the delegate, right? This is delegate, right? This is coming from one of the human workflow services. For those of you who are still legacy like me, you will remember, right? And then all of the shapes and the sides, and all of the shapes, more shapes, right? And then there's scope, parallel statement, right? And then there is the listen, right? There is a bunch of things. So hopefully your orchestration is not like this, but if it is, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. But if it is, then you got your back, right? Because this should work. And then when I run this, I get this one, right? The command, same command, same values, right? So, but you will see here a bunch of variables, right? And you can consolidate them or get rid of them if you don't need them, right? It's up to you, depends on the business logic, and then you will have the construct, right? And you will have, the construct, and then we have the expressions, and this is exactly what it does. So that's where you have to start, adding. You can add your inline C# script, like execute C# script code here, right? And then you can inject the code here, right, from the previous, in this case the trigger. Oh, no, yeah, the trigger, right? It's coming from the trigger, and then take some of this code, make the assignment. If you want to parse this, then you will do the parse XML, with this with the schema, right? And this is exactly what I used, right? So I pass the XML content here, I use the logic app, and then the name of the schema, and then the construction of the message is going to happen. This should happen after. Anyway, so and then you have some decide here, right? So then I try to preserve the names of the shapes here, so then you have true, false, and then you recognize what this is about, right? Essentially, because in many cases I had to create unique names because of the challenges of dealing with duplicates in the designer. Then scope for parallel statement. Then you have the branches, and then there is something interesting that you need to look into, right? Which is what are the shapes that or the actions that you will end up using, right? And that is part of the refactoring exercise. So that's why I always remember, this is. Yeah, it's a bit of a complex flow, right? Orchestration, and then coming a workflow, but it's supported, right? It's supported, and you can do it, and you can use it. Now, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna show you how the other command works. The LML migration one works, right? Take this one basket demo is called the LML. I'm gonna call it 519. LML, right? And then I'll show you what I mean with this, right? So let me do CLS here, and then I paste the command, paste anyway, yes, and then what I did it read from the location of the schemas that I had. I mean, it's very verbose. I'm sorry, I didn't delete the debug, but you can do it. And you can make the changes, and if I go to the what was the path? It was this one, map results output demo such and such, basket demo, map results output demo. So I go to output demo, this is the one, and I open it with Notepad, and you will see that you have this element format, right? You have XML to XML, you have XSD, the source schema, target schema, some namespaces, the relationship between the namespaces, and then you go to VS Code, right? And then what I do is this, right? So I'm going to delete these. So you're gonna ask, what is this? So basically, I'm in the map definitions for the data mapper, and I create a data map. I created a sample data map, and then I replaced the code for it. For now, there's not a workaround for that, right? So it's just the way how I did it, because again, so this is just a tool that is still work in progress, right? But you will see your schemas, you will do the mapping, right? And then you can check, if this is the right fontoid as well and the right relationships. Of course, the BizTalk mapper and the data mapper, they look different, right? And that was intentional. But yeah, I mean, you will save it. You will generate you will make a change, of some sort, and then you will generate an XSLT, right? So sometimes there are some things that it doesn't like because of the data type that is using, right? So that's why it's important for you to look into the warnings and everything. These are different technologies. We keep working on more tooling, but basically with these, then you have your definition, right? And so current date time. Let me see here, right? Input output. Output down. So we go back, we'll see, it was test map, I think, right? Yeah. So then you will see it here, right? Test panel. So you can test some values here if you want, right? I mean, I don't have a value for test, right? Yeah, you can change things here, but you save, and then you will generate an XSLT. This is the test map XSLT, and this XSLT file is the one that you will be uploading into the maps in the Logic app, right? So if we go back to the Logic app here, right? Yeah, I'm gonna start changes, right? And I'm gonna go to my Logic app. Here you will see that there is a maps directory in artifacts. This is where you will be uploading your map, and then it will be available for you to use. Okay, this is test map. So that was it, right? So for the BizTalk pipeline, same thing. You run the command, you get the workflow, and then you open it. It's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but essentially, what we try to do, what I try to do here is I try to make sure that you had the right tools to get started. So that's why I call it migration starter. And yes, so once you have this running on your environment, then you can customize, you can incorporate more Russian integration services. For one thing that I wanted to add is that this one, right? So the way how it works, if you are asking from a technical perspective, the ODX workflow migrator, it has a parser, right, which is the one that parses the orchestrations. It has a mapper that is the one that does the actual mapping of the elements, and it has a JSON generator, right? I mean, this is the basics to it, right? But I think what is more critical for this is the connector registry, which is basically the one file that has the definitions, for the service providers that we use. At least the ones here, you will find the ones that are mostly used by BizTalk, and it's equivalent, right? So then if you want to customize, you can do that. Feel free to do that, or use GitHub Copilot, and then you can make your migration project shorter, right, and more effective. So this was what I wanted to share with you all. I hope you liked it, and I will be posting this, right? This is right now private, but I will be making it public, and then once public, then I will create a post so that you all can look into it, test it, and in the meantime, while we continue working with more GitHub Copilot tools and an agent here for migration. But I thought that this was going to be useful for you all. So thank you everyone, and have a great rest of the day.